Some people live on the front lines of the struggle between good and evil. Others, like us, bear witness. I'm Therese Apel. You may know me from the cases I've covered as a lifelong crime reporter and the stories I've told about law enforcement and crime across Mississippi. Along with my co-hosts, Nicole Kral and Amanda Johansson, we've seen both the best and the worst of human nature. We believe there's no greater responsibility than telling the stories of the men and women who pursue the truth, who hunt the monsters, who speak for the victims, and who piece together some of the most significant investigations of our time. Welcome to Investigation Homicide.
While on the force, I learned that an officer is only as good as his team and the gear that he carries. Ultimately, that is what helped me make the decision to supply and support the demands that the officers need.
From uniforms to upfitting service vehicles, our family strives to connect people with the resources they need. From enforcing the law, fighting fires, or simply protecting the ones they love. At the Southern Connection Police Supplies, our family is here for yours. Stop by and see for yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. We are sponsored by Southern Connection Police Supplies, protecting and serving those who protect and serve us so they can, unlike some people in our Senate and other elected officials. That's what we'll be talking about today. I'm Therese Apel. You're watching Investigation Homicide. This is a special episode because of some fireworks that erupted at the Capitol today. I feel like Nancy Grace, Nicole.
That was an intro if I've ever heard one.
I thought you'd
I
like
like
that.
it. That one sent me back. If y'all could see me, I went, oh, goodness.
So how are you? Hadn't seen you a
good.
couple weeks.
I know. I'm good. I'm doing good. Just hanging out. I'm enjoying the weather today. A little bit cooler.
Yeah.
But, other than that, just cruising.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here, too.
I didn't know about any of the fireworks at the Capitol today, though.
We're
So
gonna
I'm
learn.
excited to learn about it and see what happened.
That's right. So we have Andy Matuszewski with us today. He goes by Ski, if you know him. And he is the president of the Southern States Police Benevolence Association, as well as a Lauderdale County deputy and a myriad of other things. So, Andy, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It means a lot to have the opportunity to come on the podcast with y'all and share some information with the viewers. I know your reach is far and wide, and I try to watch as often as I can. So having the opportunity to sit in this chair is something that I've looked forward to. I really thought I'd be talking about some major case that I dealt with at some point rather than politics, but here we are.
Well, and we'll have that too one day.
Sure.
So, first off, just tell us kind of how you got to where you are. Tell us about your background and
Goodness.
what got you here.
I'm a first-generation immigrant on my mother's side. She was a language assistant on a U.S. military installation outside of Athens, Greece. Met my dad there, who was a U.S. service member. Dad's second generation on his side of the family. And came to Meridian, which is my home, courtesy of an NAS Meridian. Shameless plug, there'll be an air show there in a couple weeks. You should go. But there's somebody in my family has been in service of this country in some way, shape, form, or fashion since my great-grandfather immigrated. Most of the time that was through the military. 4 of my dad's 6 siblings, including him, were in uniform protecting this country at some point. As a military brat bouncing around a little bit, I didn't like the idea of dragging my kids from school to school to school and place to place to place. So I decided I didn't want to do that, but I found my way to service through a different uniform. Just happened to be one with a badge and a gun. I started my time in emergency service actually in high school in 1988 as a volunteer firefighter. It's a way to get out of class and get to drive fast. So
Blinky lights and
sure,
everything.
exactly. But along the way, I started, like a lot of other young people in the 90s, I was looking for some stability. I had 2 young children. I was looking for some good, dependable insurance, good retirement plan to look after my family down the road. And the Meridian Police Department came calling and had taken some testing, things like that, and was able to start really on a wager with some friends who I was going to took the fire department test and did real well, but they weren't actually hiring at the time. But the police department was, and so there was a wager that I couldn't do as good on the police department test as I'd done on the other one. So I didn't have the money to cover the bet, so I didn't have any choice but to do real well.
Right.
So I did, and they gave me a chance. I made that transition in '94, so a little over 30 years ago now. I've been carrying a badge and a gun now. There was a sabbatical in the middle of that for about half a decade when we were fighting some wars in the desert, which amazingly enough, we're back there. where I went and practiced as a law enforcement professional for the U.S. State Department in places far and wide, from time frame from like 03 to 09. But I came back. The Sheriff's Department welcomed me back, and we've been running ever since. So how does that dovetail into the Police Benevolence Association? So back in the early part of my career, I had a situation occur where we had a critical incident that happened, and I did everything the way that I'd been trained to do it. As a result of that, I ended up without a job. They chose to terminate my employment. There was some false information that happened as part of that. I used the civil service system in the way that it was designed. A great attorney from over here that hated the city of Meridian with a passion. And together we were successful through that process, got my job back, got my back pay, got my record cleared, and that particular person, who was actually a high-ranking official in the department, was invited to retire. And they did.
That's a good day.
It was look, for a 21-year-old without the proverbial window or the pot, because 2 years prior to that was in 94. In 92, I had 2 homes destroyed by tornadoes and 2 children born in the same year. So it was kid, man. 3 days later, tornado, kid, tornado. So we weren't destitute, but we weren't far from it.
Sure.
But we had good family support and everything else. But the stability was really crucial for me. So seeing that slip away was terrifying. I had to fight that fight on my own, out of my own pocket. We're talking about in 95. That cost me $14,000 that I didn't have. Thank goodness the attorney in question was a great guy, and we did the easy payment plan, $1 down, $1 a week, and it took me a while, but I got it covered. We didn't know about the PBA was an entity that was in existence. It was born out of Florida and then moved up and started to expand, and it was in play, but we didn't know about it. There was nothing in our part of the state at that point in time. 97 rolled around. I went over with Sheriff Solly when he got elected in 96. I was actually his first hire. And a guy named Tommy Simpson, who is our executive director for this part of the world for the PBA, showed up expanding the footprint in 97, and we all saw the value. I immediately said, oh, this is great. So that organization does a bunch of different things. One of them is we provide a legal benefit for our members. As long as they were taking law enforcement action in good faith, when whatever happened, then we provide them legal representation with no limits. Anthony Fox is one of our members, as y'all are well aware with that case. I know you've spoken with him in the past. That's a case that bordered $500,000 cost. And fortunately, he didn't have to come out of pocket for that other than just his regular membership dues, just like everybody else does. So that's one piece of it. There's a death benefit that's involved. You know, there's a federal death benefit. There's a state death benefit if we lose a first responder, in our case, specifically a law enforcement officer. But those two things take time. So ours for our membership is something that happens pretty fast. So we look for a death certificate and a police report that says the person was doing their job when whatever happened. It doesn't matter if it's a wreck, if it was a felonious assault, whatever, heart attack, etc. I can pretty much get a check overnighted as soon as I have those two documents, and that covers their annual salary for a year, whatever their base salary is. And I get that note from their comptroller or their city clerk, whatever it happens to be. And I literally go and find whoever they stipulated as their beneficiary and put that money in their hands, because what's happening at the end of that 2-week cycle that you were in, paychecks stop. There may be some leave time that's accrued or some money from the PERS system that they can eventually get back and everything, but it's still coming at the end of the month.
The bills.
The house note, the car note, the kids' tuition, the medical bills, heaven forbid if whatever happened didn't happen immediately and there was some protracted medical event that took place, there's going to be bills piled up on top of that. So it's a way to keep the wolves at bay. So that's kind of a critical component, and we do a bunch of other things. There's a scholarship program for our members' kids, and it's competitive. They can apply, but that's great. I get to go give those checks out to the winners of those things, and they're largely going into the criminal justice fields or things like that in our state, which is great. And then we'll also do fundraisers across our system. We're about 72,000 and some change strong across the 11 southern states. So we're basically from the East Coast to the Arkansas, Louisiana border with Texas, and then from the Virginias south, not counting Florida. They do their own thing. But that other 11 states is us. And the great thing about an organization of that size is when we have a bad year, per se, big expenses and things like that, like the Anthony Fox case, my membership in this state, which is a little over 5,000 strong, we don't generate that kind of revenue
Right.
over that period of time. But the other states help support us. Well, then there'll be years that we won't create much of a liability, but the other states will, so we help support. So it's a great fraternal organization from that perspective. We're all looking out for each other because we all do the same thing. So as part of that, we joined, like I mentioned, in '97, got a chapter started there in East Central Mississippi, and I've been a member ever since then, including my time when I was overseas. And over that, it kind of grew and grew. When I came back, I found that things had kind of stagnated in my area, so I ended up putting myself out for some leadership in the chapter and started participating there. And that led to a seat on the state board of directors, where I met Chris Skinner, who many of y'all may know, retired out from University Medical Center. The police academy in Jackson, JPD Academy, is actually named after his father. And so we became fast friends. He ran it was in the seat that I'm in now, so it's the president for the state of Mississippi. Well, he eventually ended up being elected as the president of the association as a whole, so he's responsible for all of it, and that's a lot to try to handle in and of itself. So doing that and taking care of the state of Mississippi was a lot. So he chose to step aside from that position. That opened that spot, and that was in 2017. So I've been sitting there as president just shy of 10 years now.
Good deal. Well, and so that kind of puts you in line to, I mean, I guess I wouldn't have said that when all this was going to break loose, it was going to become a first responders versus the Senate type situation. I would not have thought of you immediately as the one to kind of take the reins. But up until now, it's always been kind of like first responders have to be nice. They can't really say a lot, like remember who you work for type thing. But what I have seen in the last 2 years, year to 2 years, is that this is becoming more and more of an issue. And I see it as a divide between, and I'm going to use the word, the elites and the people, the boots on the ground. So let's get into this. If you're watching, this is what
Rock and
you're tuned
roll.
in for. So talk us through in layman's terms, because I know that I was talking to somebody when I was writing my story yesterday. Some of this is just kind of hard to wade through. And I think sometimes, and I think you politicians know this, sometimes on purpose. So walk us through what is happening, not just to first responders and teachers, but to state employees right now as far as the PERS stuff goes.
Sure. Well, listen, you're not wrong. There's always a divide, and there's always vagueness when it comes to politically charged issues. And look, we need some wiggle room. I get that. But we often see this because we're the ones who are tasked with enforcing what comes out of those chambers. And oftentimes nobody's even consulted us. Now, they might have talked to somebody that's on the governor's guard or somebody that's working there in the Capitol. Look, and Chief Lucky hires great people, not knocking that, but their tasking is very different than the deputy in Oktibbeha County or
Right.
the constable in Jackson County. It's just a very different field. So to get good information, you got to go to the source. You got to go to the men and women that do the job each and every day. And unfortunately, we don't see that. We don't hear those calls. So, we were talking before we got started. We as a state, as employers within the state, as people who manage the retirement system, do a terrible job of educating our employees. There's somewhere around 100,000 or so members of the public employees retirement system, give or take, of which only about somewhere between 10 and 12,000 are first responders under the current classification. So the first responder, and please let me be clear here because I didn't mention that in the intro, I'm one part of the wheel. I'm just a small cog, right? The first responder retirement task force that was put together to kind of spearhead doing all this is a great group of presidents of their various associations and or the staff members that support those. So we've got groups like the Professional Firefighters Association, the Fire Chiefs Association, the Emergency Managers Group, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the Sheriff's Association, the Chiefs of Police, my organization, the Law Enforcement Alliance on Peer Support signed on. There's an innumerable number of first responder groups that came together, and that's a first.
Yeah.
That's never happened in this state, and I don't think people realize the significance of that, because when you get all these people singing from the same sheet of music, what our elected officials need to realize is we're not one vote. We're all trusted professionals in our communities, and our people look to us for knowledge and information. Because, and this is, I'm not speaking poorly about our teachers. God bless them. I wouldn't do their job for love nor money. I worked as a school resource officer for a short period of time, and I had a lot of
I've been a
apologizing
teacher,
to do.
and I'm telling you, no.
Yeah, the kids I can handle. The parents maybe not so much.
Same.
So, you know, when there is a polarizing event for them, they can hire somebody to come sit in their classroom, and they can show up over here in mass. We've still got to answer the calls on the street. We've still got to go to the burning house. We've still got to deal with the pileup on the interstate. So we can't leave what we're doing, and that we're fairly unique in that. Most other folks can take time off and go, but we still have to man staffing. So, and that's a 24/7 operation across the board. It doesn't matter which one of the disciplines you're talking about, whether it's a corrections officer, an emergency 911 telecommunicator, an emergency management fellow that's going to be out in the middle of the night dealing with a chemical spill on the side of the highway, the deputy sheriff, the police officer, any one of those professions you want to talk about, those people have got to be in those stations, in those cars, in those capacities, solving the problem. So I say all that to say this. It's a wonderful group of people. And when you start thinking about who that represents, 10 to 12,000 people out of the 100,000 that are in the system. First of all, that's a drop in the bucket in the cost, but it's a huge impactor. There's some research that says that the average first responder equates to about 10 votes.
Yeah.
Average citizen equates to about 3. So, and that's because people will ask. People trust us. We're hired on to do a job in our local communities. So as a result, they come looking for knowledge and information because, as I mentioned earlier, we don't do a great job at telling people. I've had people.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and how many normal people on the street, how many legislators have pulled somebody out of a burning car? Or have been the reason that the prowler left your property, or, protected your kid, or any number of things that a police officer or firefighter does on a daily basis.
Sure. There are a few first responders or people who were at some point in time in their lives in the legislature. So I'm not going to.
And vice versa.
I'm not going to sell those people short at all, but they are a very small minority of their contemporaries. And the problem with that is there's just not time. And some of them do a great job of sitting with their seatmates or whomever and leaning on each other for information that is specific to their particular field. But, you're talking about challenges that happen. One of the things that I watched a session in that building where votes were being taken, but the chamber was half empty. But all those votes were still being cast. So I don't get paid if I'm not sitting in my seat.
Right.
Or doing the job that I'm supposed to do. That's troublesome.
Or if you don't listen to your boss so much that they're angry about it all the time, like a lot of people in Mississippi are at their legislators, you get fired. Somehow in Mississippi, sometimes they don't get fired.
They just get reelected.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Well, and I think some of that's probably, lesser of evils. They don't have a good option. And part of that, and we struggle with this all the time in the criminal justice world, is people need to understand they're a critical component of our way of life working, whether it's showing up for jury duty, whether it's participating in their local governance, whatever that happens to be, or putting their name out there as a young person that has got an interest in making this great state that we live in better and saying, hey, I think I can do better. Not saying anything negative about the person. I'm not a big fan of mudslinging in political campaigns. Don't tell me what that other person's doing wrong. I already know about that. I've had to live with it for 4 years or however long. You tell me why it's going to be a better idea for you to sit in that seat. And my former boss, Sheriff, now Citizen Solly, we call him, because he's retired. But he spent 40 some odd years teaching us, you leave the politics up to me and I'll handle that. You get out there and do the job in the way that I've trained you. And that's great when it works like that. And it largely did at a local level when it came to him. But when we're talking about what we're talking about here, that's not the case.
Well,
that's
and the thing is, what I think is important, and I realize this is an isolated example, but I just reposted a thing on Facebook talking about John McCain and Barack Obama and how at some point during the campaign trail, John McCain was trying to give a speech and the crowd was yelling about how Obama was an Arab and he's the enemy. And John McCain said, no, he's just a good family man. And we just happen to disagree on some politics and, just kind of put the train back on track. And then when the election was over, President Obama just said, there are very few people that have served this country quite like John McCain. So I think the thing is, you can do it and get along. It doesn't have to be a political back and forth. It's their fault. It's your fault, whatever. And Nicole, I know you just went through a kind of a political campaign too with your husband. And I'm not saying that that happened, but you've
No.
recently been baptized into politics.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not going to say unwillingly, but it was one of those things that when we got into it, he ran for justice court judge, and in our minds, it was, that can't be political because it's justice court. And we learned very quickly that any sort of election is political. And we ran against some people, really hardworking people, and but there was those times where I just had to bite my tongue almost off. And I'm not. Therese knows me at this point. Like, I will sit and I will be respectful, but at some point it gets to the point where I'm just like, oh no, you're not going to sit there and say that in front of me. And you have to kind of learn to do exactly what you just said about the job. Like, I learned a lot about you have to respect people for what they're doing in that position. And as long as we were lucky that everybody kind of got along. But you see nowadays, it's almost like a reality TV show where the good people and the people who are just normal people, they don't get the airtime. They don't get the likes. They don't get the views. It's the people that are going to cause the trouble, and they're going to say the thing that is going to be controversial. And that almost gets their name out more, which is this double-edged sword, because in an election, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your name out there. Yes, you want your people to know what you stand for, but also it's a name game. The more they see your name, the more they see your signs around town and stuff. Even if they just see it on Facebook, that's marketing 101.
Yeah.
The more you see it, the more familiar you are with it. And if you're going to go cast a ballot, a lot of the general voter is going to do a little bit of research right before they get to the polls. And I learned to not do that and to actually do my research and vote for the person that I believe is going to do the best in that position.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of part of what we have at play here is that even within some of it, not just in electing, our elected officials, but in this case, some of our elected officials are not educated, have not done the research on this situation. They're voting on party lines, or they're voting along some directive given to them by someone they have an allegiance to, versus what actually makes sense. If we have first responders who get into the career at 24, and then we expect them to work 35 years before they can even retire, and that there's no hope for retirement there.
Well, and you start looking at the bigger picture. First responders as a whole are not really bulked into a lot of studies as a group. They tend to be individually along that particular career field. So I'll speak from the one that I'm the most knowledgeable about, which is law enforcement. We typically die at a rate much faster. We have one of the most dangerous careers that's out there, whether it happens as a result of the line of duty or after the fact. So the average American lives somewhere between 10 and 30 years after they retire. We typically do good to get 5. Average age that a law enforcement officer dies at, with a couple of different studies, but right now it's about 59, where the average for the average American is running up into the late 60s, early 70s, and it's getting better every year. And advances in medicine, things like that are out there, but what we're finding is the impact of things that we never had to deal with. So social media, for all of its wonders of being able to reach out and connect with people that you would have never met any other way, or staying in touch with people on the other side of the globe, is great, but it also gives voice to a lot of people that you never would have heard of before. People ask me every day, is it really as bad as it seems this day and age? No, it's not any worse or better. Crime per capita is about what it's always been in our particular area anyway. It's just you hear about it in the blink of an eye, and where you would have only heard of something that happened somewhere far away if it made national level news, now you're hearing about what happens where your cousin lived or where your aunt lives because they've posted it and you've seen it. So information at the speed of a button is the reason some of this stuff happens. Well, some of the scrutiny that we find that is unwarranted, we had a situation happen in our department not terribly long ago where an individual felt like they were wronged. Court system's there to do what it's supposed to do, and that process is still ongoing, so I'm not going to get in a lot of comments about it. But they decided to use social media as a tool to voice their concerns. The problem is it brought in people from all over that were extremists who are calling in death threats. I mean, we literally had clerical staff in our office who don't have any impact over any of this at all. They're civilian employees who answer a telephone, who handle paperwork, do things like that. And they've got people calling and finding their social media, finding their family members and making threats against them. So the stress level on our staff today is exponentially higher than what it's ever been because of these kinds of issues that we face. So when you add that in, the incidence of cardiovascular disease, heart attack, all of the things that come along with those heightened stress levels, shift work, heaven forbid. I was a night monster for a lot of my career, and it's just difficult to have a quality of life when you're working like that.
Absolutely.
So-
Well, and I want to throw in there, Ski, they we had these statistics in one of the stories we have on Dark Horse Press a few months ago, the precursor to the one that ran today. Current research states that the average life expectancy of a police officer is 57 years, and that of a firefighter is 62 years, compared to civilian counterparts of 77.5 years. Now, also keep in mind that a normal human has roughly 3 to 4 critical incidents in their life. Your average police officer has 178. So when we talk about stressful environments, and it's not just on the job. I mean, you've got, when you have PTSD, when you have that kind of anxiety and stress in your life on a daily basis, it carries over. You don't get off the clock and just go, oh, I feel better now. You know, it carries over. And so when we talk about this, to those of you that are not versed in the lives of first responders, I'm talking to a lot of you elected officials that may or may not be watching this to see what we're going to say about you. You need to understand you've lived maybe a comfortable life. These people that are putting their lives on the line for you are not comfortable. They are sacrificing. And the best you can do is 35 years. I'm sorry, go ahead, Andy.
No, you're absolutely right. And look, I can list time and again, you know, I go back to the time when I was in Walmart with my family, and a woman picks up a skillet and comes after me because I arrested her, and my children were small and were there with me and their mother, and I had arrested her husband for beating on her 2 days prior. So now I've got to stand in the gap between, and she would have been a handful. Let me just put it like that. And I've got to stand in the gap between her and my family. You know, other career fields don't face that.
Right.
They don't have to look over their shoulder. But I challenge you, go sit down with a law enforcement officer for a meal and see where they're facing and where they're sitting and what they're watching. And, you know, the unintended consequence, like what you just explained, you know, you've had exposure to things because your husband chose to run for public office, and that's put under that scrutiny. Well, I didn't have to choose to run for anything. I just took a job, and my family is now exposed to this.
Right.
I teach at the law enforcement basic academy level, and I've got a student today who told me that his son came home and told him that someone asked him, "What's this I hear about your dad's going to try to be a cop?" We haven't publicized it. He hasn't publicized it.
Yeah.
But word gets out, and you know, we talk all the time about losing your friend group because they really weren't your friends, because they don't want to hang around because of what you now represent, and that's part of it. So you're right. There's tons of impactors, and the people that live and operate in our capital largely don't have visibility of that. They don't have a basis for understanding. And look, it's not their fault. I'm not asking them to. We're all part of this system. It takes all of us to make it go around. They got to do their part. We got to do our part. Nobody questions at all whether we're going to do our part.
Right.
It just happens. You know, I mentioned the air show that's going to happen. Nobody's thought about whether it'll be safe to go there or not. They don't have to. They take it for granted that their local, state, and federal officials have done the work to ensure that thing's going to go over smooth. Firefighters have got a plan. The medics have got a plan. The cops have got a plan. Everything from parking to, you know, anything that you can possibly think of. We've spitballed, round-tabled, and tabletop exercised for months and months and months and months. So those things just happen. Now, yes, that's what they pay us to do. I'm not arguing that. Nobody's saying, oh, pat us on the back because we're doing this job that we're getting paid to do. You just have to understand that it's automatic for you. You don't have to think about that. It's just like breathing. It happens. It's not automatic for us because it comes with all this other baggage that happens. Is now we're out here in the dark of night trying to deal with this trauma. There's some folks had to deal with this issue up here on the Natchez Trace just the other day where this vehicle went in. Our peer support side is working to try to make sure that those folks get what they need. Can't imagine, how difficult that is for a person to deal with. The family that has experienced that trauma, it's horrible. But what about the person that has to leave that and then go answer the next call?
And it's on the way, they've got to pull over somebody for speeding, and that person's like, "Do you know who my dad is?" I mean, I'm sorry, I just pulled a dead baby out of a car, or just saved somebody who's been hit by a bus. And you're going to ask me if I know. I don't care who your dad is.
Sure.
That's the thought process. You want to know why that cop was a little testy? You got no idea what he just went through.
And here's the other thing: we're not out to get anybody. Now, look, you hurt somebody, you do some heinous crime. Yes, we're out to get you. We're going to find you, and we're going to put you in front of justice. Where justice, and look, that's our job. A lot of people have it confused. They think we're out here to write tickets or to, try to hunt people down and do things like that. That's not what we do. It's not what we do at all. Our job is to help society fix itself where it is broken. We do that by delivering people to justice. What justice does with them after that is not our job. That's theirs. But it's our job to get them there. Now, can we be magnanimous in the moment? Maybe that person who's trying to get to the hospital because their loved one is dying, they just got notified, doesn't need a ticket that day. Absolutely. Officer discretion goes a long way. Do our firefighters and our EMS folks bend over backwards to help us deal with people that are in crisis and, do things that are not easy for them or that wouldn't be the simple way out? Yeah, do it all the time. So there's a lot to that. But, kind of circling back to where we were talking before is what's all this got to do with the retirement program and what we're dealing with right now? We have a critical staffing, recruitment, and retention problem in the first responder fields in this state. We've got some shortages in the teacher ranks. We've got some shortages in the medical ranks too. I'm not short selling that. We are not better. We are just different.
Sure.
And here's why. If there's a shortage in the teacher rank, they don't have a third grade teacher. They will split those remaining kids and put them in those other two classrooms. Problem solved for the moment. Is it a perfect solution? No. Is it better to have 30 kids in a class as opposed to 20? No, absolutely not. I would much rather have a lower ratio, but nobody's day is going to be hanging in the balance if they do that. If I don't have that behind to put in a patrol car, if I don't have that knowledgeable operator for that fire truck, everything changes. Everything changes in a moment. And people don't realize the impact one person has. So I'll just use Anytown, Mississippi Police Department. Small community, wherever that happens to be, and they're running a 4-person shift, which that's generous. There are a lot of places working with less.
Yeah.
But they're running with 4 people. They got a supervisor and several officers. For most people, simple math says if one person's not there, we lost a quarter of our capacity. That's not true. We lost a half, and I'll explain that math for those that don't get first responder math. So we need 2 of us to go to complex things for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's always force plus 1. If there's 2 of them, we want 4 of us, preferably 5. We always want to have more than what we need. An old Ranger adage, better to have and not need than need and not have. But there's some standards if we're going to a domestic disturbance of some kind. You're always automatically going to send 2 people. It's the most hazardous thing that we do. If one of your people makes a traffic stop, that speeder that decides that they want to take it to a different level, because maybe they've got warrants. Maybe they just committed a heinous crime. I'm mindful of one of the state's great law enforcement officers, who's retired now, but he was the first deputy in the state to write 300 DUIs in 1 year. And he worked for us and made a traffic stop. And it was a simple equipment violation. He was up at the far end of the county, but his spidey senses were firing. Something was wrong. So he went through the process, but he called for some backup before it was over, just in case. Well, he disengaged because there were 3 people in the vehicle, and he was by himself, and he was a long way from help. They had just dumped a body. The trunk of that car was full of evidence. The guy who had killed that individual was sitting in the back seat next to that deputy with the loaded pistol that he had used up underneath his leg. And when we got them all into custody later, and we inquired about that, well, why didn't you shoot him? He's a pretty big old boy. I knew he was wearing a vest, and I couldn't remember how many bullets I'd already fired. I didn't know if I had enough to put him down before he could get a call for help out. That was the thin thread that kept him alive. Mm-hmm. So if you think about, we went from 4 to 3. Now that guy's making that stop by himself because these two are tied up on a call somewhere. And we don't, well, you shouldn't have stopped them. That's what we have to do. That's how we catch people. Everybody thinks we're out there to write speeding tickets and seatbelt tickets. And gosh almighty, we quit doing fee-based stuff when the justice court system, your husband will appreciate this, changed back in the 70s because it was fraught for an opportunity for corruption. It doesn't matter if I write 7,000 tickets in a year. If I write 7, my paycheck's not changing 1 penny. It's exactly the same. Well, why do you get out there and write all those tickets? Because that's the job. Criminals have to travel, and that's how we find them. You know, I may be writing a seatbelt ticket today. That may be why I was out there, because we've got a grant to fund that to go and do some occupant protection, try to reduce people dying on the roadway. But along the way, I find the murder suspect. I find the DUI at 10 o'clock in the morning that would have run some family over. You never know. We say this in our peer support side. You never know the good that you do, because you don't know what criminal didn't do something because you were present, or what you kept from happening by your intervention. So circling back, you know, what does that mean for where we're at? Well, we've got this critical shortage. Every state around us has this huge ability to recruit and pull, and it's not even a heavy lift for them anymore.
And they're taking our good officers.
And look, it's expensive and time consuming to train somebody. We say all the time, the average police officer doesn't really get good at what they do until about 3 to 5 years in. They need the time on the job working with other seasoned veterans to learn, you know, how to do the job. It's not just about driving fast, though everybody thinks that's all we do, and, you know, and putting handcuffs on people. It's not about that. Community service goes so much further beyond it. There's so much that we do. Our firefighters do so much more than just go and ride fast when something's on fire. They're doing fire prevention stuff all the time. They're doing education stuff all the time. There's tons of different things happening. Our emergency management folks, most people think of those people as the chemical folks when something is leaking out of a tanker truck somewhere. There's not a missing kid that happens in this state that there isn't an emergency manager somewhere showing up with snake boots on this time of year to go trudging through the woods with you, or bring whatever resources they have, volunteers and otherwise, to go and solve that problem. Those people are in the middle of it with us just like everybody else is. Where are we going to get those people from?
Right.
You know, when you've got border states that have all of these other tools. Louisiana has a monthly stipend for law enforcement officers specifically, but other first responders that comes out of their state budget, because that levelizes some things. You know, I wouldn't expect a Pontotoc, Mississippi to be able to pay what a Madison, Mississippi can pay. There's a different tax base. Okay. Do you, as a citizen traveling through Pontotoc, want the same level of professionalism and service when you get there and get victimized? Yeah, absolutely you do. Well, for us to do that, we got to retain good people and hope that they'll stick around home. When you've got a Tennessee that, hold on to your socks for this one, in 2024, their legislature passed a hazardous duty stipend bill for their retirement unanimously. Every single member of their legislature, their House and their Senate, unified behind the need to protect their first responders, and passed a bill that said, we're going to take care of you. This is what we're going to do in addition to the public employees retirement that you already have. And we're all on the same page about doing it. And we can't get one house of these folks to agree to get something out that is usable. And that makes no sense. And we wonder why we lose, and we have this brain drain in this state. Well, we miss out on the boat. Now, look, I'm not knocking that we had to fix PERS. There were some failures in years gone by that is not the fault of a single soul working in either one of those houses today. We made some promises to people. We gave some benefits to people without providing a funding source in the time. It was politically expedient in the moment, and that's bad Southern politics. Shouldn't happen. You should always look at the, you know, hey, if they're handing you something with this hand, what's fixing to happen with this hand? There's something else going on. And we didn't do a good job. And I'll give Daniel Sparks credit, the senator who is kind of the brainchild behind this, and he's probably got as good a grasp on the PERS issues and the Tier 5 plan as anybody else that's out there. He's right. We have a contractual requirement to take care of our employees, specifically the ones that we made a contract with, in that they hired on under a specific set of circumstances, and we're not going to touch that. We're going to leave that alone. That applies to me. I came in under what is now considered Tier 3, so a 25-year plan. So all of this fight that I'm in the middle of is not going to impact me from that perspective. But the solvency of our system as a whole does impact me. Not to mention the people that we're able to recruit, train, and retain down the road are the people who are going to be coming to get me when I'm not able and I have a medical emergency when I'm old, or that's going to be looking after my grandchildren. And if we don't protect that, you know what? All this other expenditure that we do, all these other funding bills and appropriation bills, I watched them get passed just like this today on the House floor. All that other stuff is great and wonderful. None of it's going to work if your first responder, if your rule of law, your public safety piece doesn't work. None of that happens. It's all gone, just like this. Trust me, I worked in some parts of the world where those things had collapsed.
Sure.
Haiti, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia. Trust me, that's not something that you want to see on our streets. You don't want to experience that here. And that's what happens when the rule of law fails. That's what happens when public safety goes out the window. And people are running down the street holding their loved one who's having a medical emergency of some kind or who was injured in some way, and there's no one to take care of them.
Right. Well, and let's take a minute because we have to pay the bills. We need to talk about Southern Connection right quick. You were just there a minute ago, Andy. Just a few minutes ago.
Actually just
before
left.
this.
Great folks.
Yeah. So let's hear from them, and we will be right back with I have a question for you.
While on the force, I learned that an officer is only as good as his team and the gear that he carries. Ultimately, that is what helped me make the decision to supply and support the demands that the officers need.
From uniforms to upfitting service vehicles, our family strives to connect people with the resources they need. From enforcing the law, fighting fires, or simply protecting the ones they love. At the Southern Connection Police Supplies, our family is here for yours. Stop by and see for yourself.
So, yeah. Sorry, guys. We were talking while the commercial was running. So one of the questions that I have for you, we're actually looking to see how many people are watching and seeing your comments, that kind of thing. We've got plenty of people watching, plenty of comments coming in. We appreciate that. So, Andy, let's talk for a minute. There's been some controversy surrounding and we'll just go ahead and say it because I've written stories. Delbert Hoseman has said some things that kind of seem to indicate that he just doesn't really understand first responders and what they do. The first one being that you guys could definitely work for 35 years because you're in better shape than everybody else, better health than everybody else, which, okay, I'll give him maybe he just has never bothered to read the research on that, which, I mean, a lot of times you're not going to read outside of your own career. I mean, I would think an elected statewide official would want to know about a major base of his voters, but that's something else. But recently he said, as Daniel Sparks tried to explain to you guys part of this situation, he said, don't bother, they won't even understand. Do you feel like as we talk about this, as we're seeing this happen, you guys have through all this acted in good faith that maybe if we explain, maybe if we show up, maybe if we talk it out, maybe if we have meetings, maybe if we just bring this to you, the problems that this is going to cause, that someone will hear us, care enough about us and their state to do something about this. But what has happened is they have shown first responders in Mississippi and honestly the communities that they serve that it doesn't matter what you say, how much you say it, how much it hurts, what it does, we're going to do what we're going to do.
Oh, 100%. And you know, my organization endorsed and supported now Lieutenant Governor Hoseman more than once, and that was well advised at the time. We looked to his office and others because of that connection for an opportunity to try to work together. We need to voice our opinion. We need to sit down at the table and educate people about what our career entails. So we don't expect them to know. I don't expect them to think that we know everything about what they do either, but that's how you learn, is you take the time and you invest in the people and you figure out what's happening because, you know, our job as first responders as a whole is to be fixers. Our job is to help. We tell people to teach their children all the time, look for the helpers, because that's when you're going to find the good people that are trying to solve the problem. In any critical situation, look for the people who are helping others, and that's good folks. So that's what we wanted to do here. This is a problem, It represents a ton of our people, and our people represent everybody in the state at the end of the day, because it's our job to make sure they're able to get to the poll, to get to their job doing whatever it is that they do. So our intent was to show up as an organization, as an association of all of these different entities, and be a collaborative partner with whoever wanted to work with us. We want to fix this problem. And at the end of the day, it was a little bit of an overreach in what happened in House Bill 1 last year. And we understood that, and we didn't want to do away with it. We looked at the potential for us to do something separate, but that didn't make sense. It made better sense, and they're very clear with the director over at PERS that, no, listen, it needs to stay under the same umbrella, but we can modify it within that. And he was more than happy to, whatever the pleasure of the legislature would be, to figure out a way to make that work. So I got to give props there. But when we showed up, it's not the reception we got.
Right.
Matter of fact, the first time that we met, we thought we were going to meet with the lieutenant governor, and ended up in his office with his chief of staff, who was abundantly gracious, but in a terrible situation. She was having to fill in. I understand there was some type of an emergency that morning. Don't know what that situation was. Doesn't matter. Point is, we had an appointment. We got there, and that's not what happened. She listened well, but she's not a policymaker. She doesn't have the ability to make any of those commitments or changes. Strange, he was standing there when we left. Found that kind of unusual, but
Not
okay.
really that strange, Andy.
Well, there's a little bit of nuance there.
Right.
So then we come back after some bills have kind of gotten developed. We presented the Stennis report, because we didn't just come in at this from a emotional standpoint, saying, "Oh, well, this is not going to stand," kicking and stomping our feet and sticking our lip out. We're fact-based people. Our job is to be finders of truth. So we reached out to the most unbiased professional organization that we knew, the Stennis Institute, to compare and look and see what our retirement looks like, look what our career field looks like, and compare that to the contemporaries around us. And let's just see what the numbers actually say, with no slant from anybody, just hard, cold facts. And we were 100% right. And look, before somebody starts talking about what somebody understands and doesn't understand, there are members of this group that are highly, highly educated. If you sat down and stacked up all of the degrees that are in that group, it would leave the room, several of which are in finance and economics.
Right.
So for some, and look, there was an apology floated today, though not by the person who owed it. I found that curious. That what was actually meant was that there was not a need to go into that level of detail. Well, sure it is. Your employers, who are the citizens of this state and the employees of this system, have every right to ask the questions and to be educated based off of what you believe to be the truth in that moment. And that didn't sit well.
Well, and it wasn't just that the lieutenant governor wasn't given the chance to apologize for that statement.
Oh, no.
He was given the chance at the luncheon that he came to and ate at, but when he was given the chance to stand up and talk, he just said, "I'm going to let Senator Sparks talk for me." And then he sat back down.
Yep.
There was no shaking hands, no thank you for your service, no hey guys, got it wrong, no hey you misunderstood me. There was none of that, which if it were me and I had actually misspoken, I'd be tripping all over myself, because this is a huge voter base. And I feel, as a Mississippi voter, I feel like it's dismissive, and I feel like it's disrespectful of the fact that any one of y'all could die on the road tomorrow saving his life.
You know, and as someone who's had the experience and the need for first responders, and I understand there's family members of his that are in medicine, but again, when you're kind of isolated, which in a lot of cases I'm sure he is, you just don't see it through the same lens. But when the people hire you to do that job, you're supposed to make sure you surround yourself with people who can advise you properly. And when folks show up willing to help, that you can see their agenda is simply to make the situation better, and that's when you're supposed to lean in. That's when you're supposed to be the great communicator. That's when you're supposed to be the deal maker. And at the end of the day, we hired two of those people. One of them is the Speaker of the House, and the other one is Lieutenant Governor. And those folks are supposed to work as diligently as they can with their own houses and with one another to find commonality. Listen, we didn't expect the moon. We shot in there asking for the stars and hoping to find a way to end up somewhere better than where we were. But what we got now is this finger pointing contest that's going on from one house to the other. And look, we met with the speaker before I left and came here. Super gracious. First opportunity we've had to sit down with him. Was thankful for that opportunity. And he pointed out some things that are going to be valuable for us to look at in the future and find out why things aren't working this way. But what a lot of people probably think happens up here, which is a divide along party lines, or even a divide along racial lines, which has certainly been the case in times past. I think everybody elsewhere other than the great state of Mississippi thinks that's all we do, and they're wrong. We find ways to get along more than not. But it's actually a house-to-house problem down the hall. So we've got the House pointing at the Senate and the Senate pointing at the House, and at the end of the day, they're supposed to be finding ways to solve these problems on our behalf. And we voiced the opinion. Everybody's heard it. There's no doubt. We've made our presence abundantly known that this is a problem and we need to fix it. And everybody says to our face and in media that, oh, yeah, we support our first responders and thank you for your service and this and that and the other, but not seen a single bill agreed on. There's not a single piece that has anything to do with what we've asked about that has made it through both houses. And I don't care if they modify it. Let's find ways for agreement. Let's find ways to get in the middle. And we may not get it all, but eventually we will when we realize that there's a need. So our gathered groups are of the opinion that the time for talking's over. The opportunity to solve this, it doesn't matter to us which house it comes out of. I don't care who gets the pat on the back. Let's all get on the Capitol steps and take a picture together. We'll stand with all of you. I'm not afraid of that. I don't care by what color you are, by what name you call God, or how you find love. That does not matter to me one iota. What my personal beliefs are this. I took an oath to protect each and every one of those people and everybody else in this state and everybody who comes to this state. If they be here up to and beyond my retirement, I can tell you of any number of retired guys that are still sheepdogs. They're still out there solving problems every single day. We've got a retired member of my department that happens to live down on the Gulf Coast now and helped us solve a missing child case just yesterday that had been going on for weeks, because that never goes away in us. We're always looking to find ways to solve it. And the problem is, it seems like the people that we've sent to our capital are finding ways to disagree more than they're finding ways to agree.
Well, and so you say that, and obviously you guys can tell Tier 5 is something we could talk about all night.
Oh, sure.
And I think would if we were given the chance. I do want to also touch on some of the other law enforcement and first responder bills that have been in legislation. There's, radar for sheriff's departments. This comes up a lot. I
didn't even know they didn't have radar.
You didn't?
A lot of people don't.
I didn't know. I thought everybody had radar.
And people are afraid of, and I'm gonna invoke an old name of the Roscoe P. Coltrane's of the world. Those who don't know who that is, that was a fictitious character from a television show years ago. But that there would be speed traps and things like that. A speed trap is not a trap. If the speed limit says 50 and you're doing more than 50, then you're wrong. It's that simple. Municipalities enforce that law that way. The Highway Patrol enforces that law that way. And if you look at the statistics, we lose more people on our unincorporated county roads every year than we do on any other roadway system that we have, because there are more miles of those roads than there are of anything else.
Right. And I'll say this, as a former volunteer firefighter in Lincoln County, there were so many wrecks that we worked where someone was going way too fast for the county road they were on. And one summer, I worked 3 different rollover wrecks where teenage girls were thrown free of the vehicle and crushed by their vehicle because they were going too fast on a county road where deputies were not allowed to run radar.
And this is a perfect example of this compromise and agreement that we talked about. Instead of doing what was simple, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's broke. We're not able to enforce the laws equally and fairly across everywhere, which, as you said, you thought it was. And so did a large part of the population. Well, now what we've done is we've educated them that it's not, so it's going to be worse instead of better.
Sorry.
All we had to, no, it's not your fault. I was talking about as a result of this bill being put out and all the press that's happened around it. What we very simply could have done is simply changed a couple words and added deputy sheriff to the law that existed, and now everything's fine. But instead, we had to come up with this weird formula of, it can only be in school zones or work zones in one version of the bill. And it can't be within 1,000 feet of a municipal limit. Now, look, I'm no attorney. Be the first one to admit it. But a first-year law student could tear that thing up before they've had their first cup of coffee on anything that was charged under that, because it's an arbitrary number. Everywhere you go in the state, there is a jurisdictional line, whether it is a municipal limit, whether it is a county line, whether it is a state line. Those are established, and everybody that lives in or works in and around there knows what those are. Why would you come up with some other number? And how are we going to measure that? Are we going to use a laser finder? Are we going to use a road wheel? Are we going to use the odometer in our car? All of those things would have to be calibrated to be accurate. So all of that it was designed to make the bill fail. So all we did was spend a bunch of time and energy and effort and paper and accomplish nothing.
So how much do you see that happening? Because I mean, the most knowledge I have of these kind of things, because if you know anything about my career, I don't do a lot of politics. I don't cover a lot of politics. Nicole and I work together.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, that was pretty much what got me hooked in. She was like, "But I promise I won't do politics." I was like, "All right, bet."
yeah, then we'll get in.
Yeah, because look, there is a political component here. Obviously, we've talked a lot about what happens in the houses of Congress, but we're talking about it because it affects the first responders that take care of each one of our families.
Right.
That's the reason that's even an issue. So that was one, and there are lots of different law enforcement or public safety and first responder related bills that are out there. We have a legislative platform for my association. We have one for my department, and they mirror more or less. There's a few nuances that are different, but at the end of the day, the citizen has the right to be able to expect to be treated the same pretty much everywhere they go.
Sure.
We've done that at the federal level. We have something known as an interstate compact that requires that a person traveling through our state is not held for things that they didn't have any way of knowing was different here. When we had alcohol laws in the state that limited the possession of alcohol in certain counties, you couldn't expect somebody from Rhode Island to know that coming through here. So there were exceptions based off of federal standard. I can't expect somebody from Tennessee to know what the requirements of our tent law is here. And we post a bunch of stuff. We post that you got to follow the speed limit. We post that you got to move over for stopped emergency vehicles on the side of the road, on the side of our roadways when they come into the state. That makes sense. But the nuances of the traffic code is a little bit much to ask of the average citizen. So we need to do better about being standardized on many things. That was one of the things that opened my eyes in my time overseas, is all those are nationalized police forces. We're the only country in the civilized world that has local control of emergency services as a whole. And that brings with it this whole patchwork of rules and laws, and it makes it complicated for the citizens.
Sure. Well, so when you talk about, some of the, like when you were saying that about how much work goes into it and then it turns out to be for nothing. And there are these ones we do every year. That's what I was going to say earlier is my biggest experience was covering the gang bill back in like 2015 to 18, somewhere in there. That's when I was doing all my gang work. And so I was reading a lot about this bill, a lot about obviously I had deep knowledge at the time of those things. But I found that the arguments against it were silly and obviously just made to mask a political, like, we're not doing this, but we have to put things forward to make it sound like there's a reason. How often do you feel, and I understand that it's hard to tell sometimes it's very blatantly obvious, but how often do you feel like some of these things are just meant to shut down first responders, and why?
Look, we had a bill in this session of Congress floated to take away one of the strongest life-saving tools we have, which is a less lethal tool, predominantly manufactured by a company called Axon, or more commonly known as a taser, to take that tool away from law enforcement. So when a person is high on drugs or having a mental episode or something like that, and the only way that we can protect them from themselves and others is using that device to restrain them physically, and instead we're going to take that tool away from law enforcement officers, what's that leave? Now I got to physically put hands on somebody and possibly fight them, which could end up in them or us or both being hurt significantly, or we have to resort to deadly force.
Right.
So that makes no sense whatsoever. So when those types of things happen, it certainly makes us question the thought process behind what happens in these houses of Congress. I can promise you, no law enforcement officer stepped up and said, "Oh, that's a great idea. Let's take away the best tool that we have to solve things without violence." Nobody said that. So it really hurts when you have people that you trusted to come over here and do the will of the people, and this is what we've ended up with. And I would just encourage the public, members of the public employees retirement system, to educate themselves. Reach out to your local firefighter, your local medic, your local law enforcement officer, your elected sheriffs, and just ask them. Come and see them. Every one of them wants things better because they need the staff. They need to be able to take care of their people. They need to be able to recruit and retain folks, and the way to do that is through education and getting our people together. And at the end of the day, we're going to need people to help us when it comes time to politic for folks.
Right.
Election cycle will be coming before you know it, and we'll do a good job of keeping score and keeping records of who has leaned in with us and who's just done it lip service. And I hope folks come around. I really do.
And like you said earlier, for every one first responder, there's an average of 10 voters. So keep that in mind. Before we go, Nicole, I want to use you as an example, and we've done this before.
Oh boy.
So when Nicole and I started working together, you were kind of ambivalent and a little on the maybe not side about law enforcement.
Correct.
I'm saying this, and I'm going to let you tell your story, because if you're not sure and you're kind of like, why do I care what happens to cops, but I don't really know any? Nicole, what did it do for you just to talk to some?
So I think because I'm almost the opposite of your family, so we're very similar but also very different. My family is also immigrants, but we flew very much under the radar. My parents were always taught us to be respectful of law enforcement and, do your community service and all that good stuff. But my dad served in the my dad served in the Slovakian military, but not the American military. The most exposure to law enforcement I had was my best friend's dad, who worked in all sorts of different fields. And that was pretty much the extent of it. Up until then, it was just pretty much stay away from cops. If you get pulled over, just smile, give him your ID, take your ticket, deal with it later. And when Therese approached me about starting Dark Horse, I was like, man, I don't know. Like, I lean a little bit differently than a lot of people in Mississippi, and this is probably going to, people aren't going to like me and blah, blah, blah. And I think she did a really good job of introducing me to the good ones first. And I'm very grateful for that, because the crew of guys that were kind of our go-to at that time were just very, you can tell immediately if a person actually cares. And I could tell that they actually cared. And that to me opened my eyes to see, oh, this does exist. This isn't a person I need to be scared of. This isn't a person that I need to run away from. This is somebody who is a part of my community that actually does care about not just my personal well-being, but the well-being of everybody around me. And they're just, not only that, but they're just human too, and they're doing their best. That's not to say, and, Therese was like, we're going to tell the stories of the good guys. We're also going to tell the stories of the bad guys. And she did stand by that. And, over time, the other day we were talking, I'm going to give you your flowers too. Somebody asked me, we had a client come in and he had seen, news stuff or whatever. He goes, what do you think of Therese? And I was like, I think Therese is the best person I've ever met.
Oh, no, I'm going to cry.
He was like, really? And I was like, no, I'm serious. Like, I think Therese taught me that, integrity isn't something that just comes naturally. You do have to work for it. And it's hard to stand up and, speak your mind in front of people, even though that might be scary in the moment. I still look at her in awe because she does things that I know I never could do. We always joke she runs towards gunfire, I run away from it. I don't think that that's gonna change. I don't think that's just me personally. But the whole experience, starting Dark Horse Press, being her friend, it's been years, and it's almost been 6 years now, probably more than that. And every year we get a little bit further along, and I can get to meet new people through this podcast now. And I learn a lot. And I think that that's the whole point of this, is not just the general public needs to learn things. Legislators need to learn things as well. We're all just people. And if we can all open our hearts and open our minds just a little bit more and be willing to listen, I think a lot of things would change. And even if you're not familiar, not educated, or not particularly fond of a certain idea, do your best to do your research on it. And I've seen Therese do that through and through. If she is, we all have our things that we grow up with, our parents instilled in us. And with Therese, it was, I'm not familiar with this particular subject, so let me do my research before I speak on it. And I think that if a lot more people were like you, Therese, and now knowing you ski like you ski, I think the world would be a little bit of a better place.
Okay, I'm going to sob all the way home now.
Don't do that.
We call those light bulb moments.
Yeah, I had a lot of those.
in our crisis work, which we have a basic crisis intervention class happening in our town starting Monday. About Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, you see the light bulb flicker on because you've got these folks who have been out there protecting and serving, doing things, but maybe they didn't understand the mental health aspect as well as they should and things like that. And we expose them to people and education and things, and you just see it go, that's why that person is like that. And then you see that care and compassion coming out in them, and those people self-identify. They're sitting in that classroom because we chose to send them, because we could tell that they had a heart for people to begin with. And, you mentioned the integrity piece earlier, yes, it's something you have to work at, but it is also something you will absolutely vehemently defend. Won't give it up at all if you have it.
Yep. And I've seen Therese do that through and through. Yeah. And that's one of those things that it teaches me that it's possible. And there's a person right here sitting in front of you every single day doing the work and making sure that it's done the right way. So don't go listening to those cuckoos out there. Tune into Therese, because she does do her research and she does have the integrity that I think everybody's kind of searching for right now.
And believe it or not, I don't pay her anymore.
She doesn't. I know, right? I'm just here. I'm just talking.
Well, any closing thoughts? Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Andy, for being here. And when I first started this episode, before we actually started it, I was like, I don't know anything about hers. But kind of listening to yours and Amanda's episode and our episode now, and with Adam being judge, I think that it is something that it affects so many people. And I've always been that kind of person, even if it doesn't affect me, if it seems unfair or if it feels wrong to other people, that's something that I would like to, I know I can't change it myself, but make an impact in any way that I can. And with with all these associations and societies that we have around, there's always a way to get involved. There's always somebody to reach out to. There's always a way to get the information that you need. So I just thank you for being willing and explaining it so eloquently and explaining it in a way that is digestible to just kind of the layperson like me.
Sure. And it's easy to get muddy in the waters when you start talking numbers and things like that. And I was very intentional about not spending a lot of time on that, because the average person, without having a graphic in front of them or some way to really sit down and study that, it's going to be hard. It's hard for our membership. It's hard for the people that are practicing in not just our career, but in public service as a whole, whether they're driving a school bus or the guy that bush hogs the side of the road for the county. They just don't have the opportunity to see that each and every day. So that's why I encourage them to reach out, talk to somebody, sit down with somebody in your local community that is involved and knowledgeable in the system, and let them help guide you. And we're not asking for the moon, because I know the taxpayers are like, oh, well, that's the last thing we need is more taxes. And we agree. We're those people too. We have to live here too. We have to raise our kids and grandkids here. And it's about leaving a stronger, safer, healthier Mississippi. And that legacy is important. While I'm an immigrant family, I'm immensely proud to be from this state and work here. I don't discount my Heinz 57 mutt heritage that I have because of where all I come from, and I celebrate that, and I still spend time with those people every opportunity I can. But when you ask me where home is, I always get a smile on my face. For all the problems that we have found ways to live and work and get along that most other parts of this world couldn't begin to fathom, but we can still do better. There's always room to grow.
Completely understand where you're coming from with that, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, for listening. Thank you for your comments. Thank you to Southern Connection for making this podcast possible. If you're looking for, any kind of police supplies, first responder supplies, go by, check them out. They do have the new Glocks, so check that out too if you're in the market for one of those. And you can find us on all your favorite platforms, podcast-wise, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Spotify,
Apple, iTunes, everywhere.
We're everywhere.
Daniel did a very good job making sure that we were on everything that you would possibly want to find us on.
That's right. And tell them about Audio Alchemy.
Thank you to Daniel Anderson with Audio Alchemy Productions for
Stop it.
for allowing us to have this wonderful podcast.
Keep
if anybody
going.
is in the
You're
market
doing
for a
good.
podcast,
You're
you can
doing
reach
good.
out. You can reach out to me or Therese,
That's right. Or call or text.
or call or text.
601.
There you go.
672-659-1. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Ayo.
All right. And thank you guys for joining us.
Before the ladies showed up, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Daniel. We
did.
compared some notes and some stories from our past, and I'll tell you, you guys are blessed to have him. And,
We are.
It's a wonderful facility. I've enjoyed my time here, and anybody that needs to put out some content, I can't imagine a better place to do it in the metro area.
Thank you for saying that. Your $100 is in the mail. Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you. We will see you guys next week. And thank you for watching Investigation Homicide.
Goodbye.
Night.